what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys today, just moments ago, really, Goodvito posting his 10 days out physique update from the Pittsburgh Pro. Goodvito, arguably one of the sleepers in this lineup because we don't know quite how he would do against these top-level guys. Obviously, he just won his first ever pro show and Olympia qualification at the Arnold Classic South America just a few weeks back. Actually, I guess it was about a month ago now, but still. So he's coming in off this pretty big victory for him. It's technically an Arnold Classic title. He's now going to the Olympia. This Pittsburgh Pro is not really going to be a deciding factor for him when it comes to the Olympia in the sense that he's already qualified. But he posted this front double bicep. And I've said this before, but I think this is his best shot. I think Goodvito looks really solid from the front. He's got a crazy X-frame because his legs are so big, his quads are so not only big, but really detailed. He's got really good quads. He's got a really small waist. He's got a great V-taper. He's got a great front double bicep, a lot of width throughout the shoulders in that pose. So it just makes that pose look really crazy for him. The size of his legs, the size of his upper body, and having that kind of a small waist, just a really good X-frame, really good V-taper. Solid pose for him. His conditioning looks really good here. You're seeing a lot of detail. You're seeing a lot of vascularity. And again, you're seeing that really streamlined frame that he's got. And that's, I think, the impressive thing about Vito is the size that he carries, especially in the legs. He doesn't seem to be sacrificing anything when it comes to the size of his midsection. To have legs that big and a midsection that small, I think is a very rare thing in bodybuilding. I think that's one of the biggest strong points of Goodvito's physique that you can see showcased here. But I think based on what we saw at that Arnold Classic South America show, like I said, he's strong from the front, but the back poses I felt like were where you can really see the flaws in his physique, in particular the back double bicep, which I think guys like Nick Walker have a much better back double. And I think in the side shots, you can make an argument for guys like, we already talked about this as well, but like Bonac and Krizo, a lot fuller from the side. So Goodvito, really strong from the front, posting an update like this. It does get a lot of people talking because he looks crazy in the front double biceps pose. But I think he's going to have a hard time. I really do, from the back and possibly also from the sides. But even so, it's hard not to look at an update as impressive as this and not consider the possibility that Goodvito could be a dark horse in this lineup where he could secure maybe a top 3 spot. If some of these guys come in off and Goodvito really nails it with his size and his crazy structure, maybe he does get one of these top spots over some of these guys that are really already established Olympians, even all the way down to Krizo and Bonac. I mean, these are guys that have been around forever. They've been at the Olympia multiple times. They've been top 10 at the Olympia. Bonac has been top 2 at the Olympia. These are veterans at this point. So I think realistically, if Goodvito beats any of these guys that we've been talking about for weeks now, it's a huge accomplishment for him. I don't think, well, I have seen people saying that they think Goodvito is going to win. I personally don't think Goodvito has a chance of winning the Pittsburgh Pro, but I think any one of these guys, if he beats any of them, it's huge for him because, again, this is a guy that's never been to the Olympia. And these guys that we're talking about are top Olympians. They're not just Olympians. These are the cream of the crop here. And if Vito is able to beat either Krizo or Bonac, that puts him in a conversation going into his first Olympia ever as a possible top 10 in his first ever Olympia this year in 2025, which would be huge because, like I said, both Bonac and Krizo, their most recent Olympia placings are 7th. So if he beats one of them here, it makes a strong argument for him being a top 10 guy at this year's Mr. Olympia. And I want to show some of these updates that we got from Nick Walker today because in his string of updates that he posted, we also got a front double bicep, and I've already seen people posting them side by side. So let me show all of Nick's updates. It was a front double bicep, a back lat spread, and a front lat spread, which I think he's really improved that pose for himself. I think for him and Vito both, that front lat spread is one of both of their weaker poses, and I think Nick has really improved the way that he hits that pose. So hats off to him for improving that front lat spread the way that he has because the shape of his physique has not really been super conductive to that pose looking great on him in the past, and this is one of the better looks that I've seen from him in that pose. But like I said, I've seen a lot of people put Nick's front double from today up against Goodvito's front double from today. And it's an interesting comparison, right? Because Nick does have a really good front double bicep pose, but what Nick does not have is the taper or the X-frame that Goodvito has in that pose. And that's why I said I think it's an important distinction to make with Goodvito, that I think that is his number one best pose. But when you see him from the back and from the sides, I don't think it's nearly as impressive. And even some of his front shots, like I said, the front lat spread, I don't think is that great of a pose for Goodvito. So I think, seeing this comparison of Goodvito and Nick Walker in the front double bicep is a bit of a cherry-picked shot, even though, like I said, I don't think it's a weak pose for Nick either. He's got great arms, not the best taper, and his quads aren't quite comparable with Goodvito's. But I do think when you talk about from the sides and from the back, it's a different story with Nick versus Goodvito. But I do see the idea behind posting this comparison, because obviously Goodvito is this dark horse going into the show. Nick Walker is one of the established favorites, being a top 3 Olympian. He's an Arnold Classic Ohio champion. Obviously, this return of Nick Walker's has been a much discussed and anticipated comeback. And Goodvito, not as much, because it's not a comeback. He's not been to the Olympia. He's not been to the Arnold Classic Ohio. So I do see how this is an interesting comparison, because Nick is this established guy. It's got a lot of hype. He's really proven himself at the top shows. He's a New York Pro champion as well, 2 times. So to see him in any shot next to a young up-and-comer like Goodvito, where Goodvito, let's just say it, in this particular comparison, in this particular pose, I think Goodvito does look a lot better. So I can see the interesting part of a comparison of a new guy versus an established guy that's been at the top for a little while now. But even if Goodvito beats Nick in this one pose, do you think he's beating Nick in the back double bicep? Do you think he's beating Nick in the side chest? Do you think he's beating Nick in the most muscular? Maybe the front double in abs and thighs, he might beat Nick. But that leaves 6 other poses that I think Nick is the odds-on favorite to take those poses over Vito. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Nick Walker versus Goodvito, these recent updates. Who do you guys think is going to place higher at the Pittsburgh Pro? Now, we also did get a couple of updates from Martin. These will be his 10-day-out updates as well. We haven't seen as much from Martin as some of these other guys in terms of full physique updates, especially, nothing really in posing trunks. Even that guest posing that he did, I guess it was like a week ago at this point, the guest posing that we talked about, he was wearing like sweatpants or joggers or something. He wasn't wearing posing trunks at the guest posing. And I think that this is really why the show is so exciting to me. I think in particular, Martin and Nick are the 2 guys that I'm the most back and forth on in this lineup. Is it going to be Martin that beats Nick or Nick that beats Martin? Both of these guys are top Olympians. Nick does have the higher Olympia placing, although he hasn't been at the Olympia in 2 years. Nick's highest being 3rd, Martin's being 4th. But I'm the most back and forth between these 2 guys. I'm pretty strong in the opinion that Derek is going to win the show. I'm not as strong in the opinion on who's going to be second, who's going to be the guy that's able to push Derek the most. Because I think Martin is a fantastic bodybuilder. I really like Martin's physique. And I think the same thing about Nick. I think Nick is a fantastic bodybuilder. I mean, all the flack that Nick has gotten over the past couple years, whether some of it's deserved, whether some of it's not, I think Nick is a true bodybuilder's bodybuilder. He's a freak. He works really hard, and he's coming back from adversity. I like the fact that Martin is a young, up-and-coming guy that had a tremendous year in 2024. We've seen him make massive improvements from show to show. I really enjoyed seeing him go head-to-head with Chris Bumstead at the Prague show, becoming one of the few bodybuilders ever to beat Chris Bumstead in either bodybuilding or classic physique. So I've really enjoyed Martin's rise over the past year or so, and I've really enjoyed Nick's career over the past, what has it been now, 5 years? And I think that if both Martin and Nick are at 100% at this Pittsburgh show, it's going to be it's going to be a very close battle. I fully believe that. Now, if Martin for some reason comes in off, or Nick, then maybe it's not as close. And I think that was kind of the conversation pertaining to that guest posing that Martin did a week or so ago. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What are your guys' top 3 for the Pittsburgh Pro? Also, just to throw this in here, another recent physique update from Krizo, where I don't really have much to say about this because I've said it 1,000 times. These updates from Krizo are just absolutely, he's just a freak. The size, the detail, the vascularity, the comeback story. Krizo, I hope he does really well here. I really do. I think Krizo's, just his whole journey has been super entertaining to watch, and these updates are just unreal. But like we've seen with Goodvito, I mean, he looks crazy in these Instagram updates, but sometimes it doesn't translate as well to the stage. And I think at various points throughout Krizo's career, he's had kind of that same issue where you see these updates where he looks like a world beater, and it's just not the same thing on stage as it is on Instagram. But we'll see. We're really only a week away now. And I wanted to touch on this as well. We got a couple updates from Ramon Dino at now about a week away from the guest posing that he's going to be doing, which I think is another, massive. I think this is a massive story going into Pittsburgh. This guest posing of Samson, Keon, Ramon, and Mike. We finally get to see Ramon versus Mike for the first time in 2025. And like I've said before with this conversation of who is going to be the heir to the Chris Bumstead throne, I think this will be a really interesting comparison to see on the Pittsburgh Pro stage. And I think Ramon looks incredible in these updates. I really do. I think the reason he dropped in placings at the Olympia was that he was just off. But I think when Ramon comes in on, I think he's just as viable with a guy like Mike or with a guy like Rough Diesel or with a guy like Urs. And I think we probably can see Ramon back in that mix. If he's on in 2025, I don't see any reason why Ramon isn't going to be in contention for that top 3 or for that title unless he's off again. I really think that's what it was. He was just off. But when he's on, I think he's really in that conversation. And I think this Pittsburgh Pro guest posing will be a really interesting preview of that, among other things. I think it's also going to be an interesting preview of what Keon as an open bodybuilder could look like. And I do want to touch on this as well. So we did get a response from Brian Powers, who is the executive director of the Arnold Classic, to the whole Dan Solomon, Olympia, black backdrop, lasers conversation. So let me give you guys the context here. This is the statement that Brian issued publicly, and he says Arnold will never compromise the integrity of the sport for lasers. Now, the context of this is this clip that Brian posted to his story from that Beyond the Stage TV interview with Dan Solomon. So this is what Dan was saying in this clip, and this was Brian's statement in the context of this clip from Dan about the lasers.
I know for certain, without any degree of speculation, that it is bringing more horsepower into our community. Sponsorship, exhibitorship, celebrity connection, influencer connection. They are showing up. They are a part of it because we are taking things to another level. And if that means that the separation between an athlete's glutes and hamstring might be muted a little bit by an aggressive laser or a spotlight, then that's a price that we are willing to pay because we have to grow the sport. If people want to make more money in this sport,
So look, at the end of the day, I'll say this. I think one of the reasons why this type of story is getting so much play right now is because it's been kind of a slow couple weeks. There's kind of been a slow gap with the bodybuilding news in between the last show and Pittsburgh. So this is kind of getting a little bit more traffic than it usually would. I mean, we're talking about the backdrop of a show, that's half a year away. But I really do think that this public conversation, and specifically having kind of a public back and forth between both Brian and Dan, is overall going to be, or hopefully will be, a net positive for the sport of bodybuilding, for the competitors, and for the fans, because I think this is the type of thing that pushes a positive change, because the fans will vote. They're going to vote with their dollar. They're going to vote with their view. They're going to vote with their public support, and I think the show that starts to do more things that are in line with what the fans are suggesting, what the fans are overwhelmingly majority saying, that's going to be the show that gets the most votes in those different avenues. And I think the public pressure from one show like the Arnold to another show like the Olympia is one of the ways that you get those changes accomplished. Because this is an interesting thing to me, because I really think this is a strange hill to die on for Dan. Talking about the backdrop, talking about the lasers, talking about the graphics, talking about the LED screens, because this doesn't seem to be like a 50-50 issue. The fans seem to almost unanimously want to move in a direction, and I said this in the last video, I don't think we're asking to just change everything completely for next year and have just a straight-up black backdrop, remove everything else next year. As nice as that would be and as cool as that would be, I don't think that's the realistic expectation. I think the fans just want it to move more in that direction of better lighting, less distracting backdrop, less lasers, preferably no lasers, no smoke, instead of what seems to be a line in the sand saying, no, not only are we going to continue doing what we're doing that you guys seem not to like, but it seems like they're leaning more into that idea with these public statements and saying, we're going to actually go in the opposite direction of a Detroit Pro, and we're going to keep adding these fancy things because it brings more sponsors. It brings more eyeballs, in their words, eyeballs, sponsors, and revenue. And so I think it's a weird hill to die on, because not only do the fans almost unanimously seem to be in support of moving in the opposite direction that the Olympia seems to be moving and going towards a more, streamlined, less intricate, less loud and noisy and lasery backdrop. It seems like the athletes do too. A lot of the DMs that I've gotten have been from guys saying, look, thank you for saying this, because we feel like we can't say anything because this is a show that we're competing in. Obviously, I'm not going to say the names of those guys, but I was kind of surprised by some of them. So it's not even just the fans. It's the bodybuilders. It's the athletes that share this opinion as well. They're like, look, we work all year to get to the Olympia. Like, that's the grand stage. That's the big moment in our career. And the pictures and videos of us from the show look like shit. And I think that is why the reaction from the fans and the athletes has been so loud and visceral on this issue, is because it's kind of a hand waving away of saying, oh, it's just kind of unbased or unfounded criticism. It's just critics. It's just stupid criticism. I think it really is valuable, legitimate feedback from fans and athletes of that show. It's not just random, unfounded criticism. People really feel this way. It's not like a small number of people that are really loud. It's a majority of people, including the athletes. And I think that's the reason why this continues to be a talking point, because people still feel this way. A lot of people still feel this way. And it seems like every year it's the same response. It's kind of hand-waved away and dismissed in really kind of a condescending way, honestly. And so it's brought back up again every year because people still feel this way. And I think kind of the impression that people are walking away with in situations like this, and I would say, like, when we say the athletes complaining about this as well, I think this is very low on their list of complaints with shows like the Olympia. They have other things they complain about that I think are much more important, like the time that they go on stage or the time that they're waiting to go on stage. But I think, like, with situations like this, the impression that people walk away with, and why the Arnold is kind of roped into this conversation, is because the impression kind of becomes that the Olympia is now just a business. We're focusing on what is going to be best for business, what's going to appease sponsors, what's going to bring in money. And again, all of this is a business at the end of the day. The Arnold is, the Olympia is, the IFBB is, that's fine. But I think the impression that people get is now the Olympia is just business-oriented, just money-oriented, whereas the Arnold I think they come out of this with the appearance of they still have the heart of Arnold Schwarzenegger being involved in that show, and his love for bodybuilding is more the driving factor of that show than it is the bottom line. Arnold is a billionaire. I think people come away with the impression that they're listening to the fans. They're doing things for the betterment of the sport, like changing their lighting, like changing their backdrop, like increasing the prize money, like making these public statements saying they're listening to the fans, and they're not as worried about their bottom line. And of course, to an extent they are. They're a business as well. But I think people, that's the impression, is the Olympia has now become more of a bottom line driven business, where the Arnold kind of still has that heart and soul of Schwarzenegger himself still being involved in calling the shots. And I think why this perceived rivalry between the Arnold and the Olympia is so fascinating, because it opens the door to this chicken or the egg discussion, which is, did Arnold make the Olympia popular, or did the Olympia make Arnold popular? It's like a chicken and the egg type of thing. So this rivalry has, 60 years of history behind it. And obviously that's not 60 years of a rivalry, but I find that discussion so interesting. Is, did Arnold make the Olympia, or did the Olympia make Arnold? And I think bringing that all the way to 2025 with now this perceived rivalry that there seems to be, even though Dan says there's not, I still think there clearly is. And I don't think you need to look any further than the prize money thing. I really do think that the only reason the Olympia bumped their prize money to $600,000 was directly in response to the Arnold bumping theirs up to $500,000. And I think you need to look really no further than that there is a rivalry to some degree. But anyway, I'm not going to make this one a half an hour long video too. I'm going to end it here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, click that bell notification icon if you have not already. And as always, I love you guys. Appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at Nick Strength Power. My Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power. My secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.